So welcome to a little True North Extra as we finish up the week with Rob Roper and Bill Sayre. Bill, we finished out the show today and we started talking about the article in the Stowe Reporter, the editorial
Right.
about Brian Doobie and Deb Markowitz, and you had some great thoughts on that we didn't have time for today. You want to elaborate?
Well, sure. There's never enough time, Rob, especially when got such good material. And we give credit to the Stowe Reporter for acknowledging that we do have some problems, some challenges, and obstacles to economic growth here. But it reminds me of the 1990s when the governor was quite critical of anybody or any group who would recognize and describe the economic obstacles that we face, the high taxes, over-regulation, particular policies that would slow down the economy rather than keep it growing and keeping prosperity. And much the same argument that Deb was using against Brian, and that is.
So I should give a little bit of background for those who may not have read the article or seen
Sure.
the Doobie Markowitz story. Essentially what happened is Brian Doobie put an ad in the New York Times online. It was targeted only to people who had a Vermont zip code. So when you clicked on a story online, if you were from Vermont, you got to see the banner ad that basically said Vermont ranks 47th in the country in terms of business environment. Is that good enough? And if you clicked on the yes or the no, it brought you to Brian Doobie's website. Deb Markowitz went after Doobie, saying you shouldn't be talking about our bad business environment. And the argument that we make, and the Stowe Reporter, to their credit, picked up on, is you can't solve the problem unless you're willing to talk about it, and you have to recognize that you have a problem in the first place. And truth be told, I think was the name of the article, or to tell the truth. And even if they hated it, they agreed that Brian Doobie was right.
Well, and so Deb's argument has a superficial appeal to it, because if you're trying to sell something, and what we are trying to sell Vermont, let's face it, we want Vermont to be a place where entrepreneurs want to come, create businesses, grow the businesses they have, invest capital, create jobs, good jobs. And if we're talking about problems, then it's possible, even likely, that some will say, I don't want to deal with all that. I'm going to New Hampshire or Tennessee or South Carolina. So it has a superficial appeal to it and a certain amount of truth. But as you say, Rob, one of the first steps in a 12-step program, for example, is you have to recognize you got a problem. And that's what Brian is doing. If you don't define it, understand it, you can't solve it. We're overtaxed and we're over-regulated. And if we're going to become more attractive for job creators, we've got to become less so, not more so. Now, what it makes me think of is the story about the emperor with no clothes. In the 1990s, that's how we felt. We felt like we were being told we couldn't say the emperor had no clothes. In this case, it's an open seat, the governor's race, and you have two candidates with very different views as to how we should go about making Vermont a better place to do business, a more attractive place. And frankly, I think Brian's on the right track by saying we got to hold the line on taxes, we got to hold the line on spending, we got to make regulation more common sense, we've got to empower people to pursue their dreams, to follow opportunity. That's what will get us out of the difficulties we're in.
So one more item that we didn't get to talk about at all today, Bill, was on the front page of the Burlington Free Press, and that was the one highlighting the fact that public workers were watching pornography and watching basketball on their computers during the workday. And it's kind of funny, and we were going to laugh about it when we brought it up earlier, but it raises a serious point in that these are folks that have great job security, they have tremendous benefits, There are organized public union, and we've seen what's happened with public unions in California, and we've seen what's happened with the public unions in Greece. They're really sort of at the heart of a lot of the economic problems that states and indeed countries are facing. And it would be one thing if we were sort of getting our money's worth, but for somebody who's taken a huge pay cut or even lost their job in the state of Vermont, is trying to work hard to pay their taxes, and they're paying their taxes to these people who are watching porn or basketball or whatever, to have an excellent pension, great benefits, and they leave work at 4:30 every day.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a couple of important questions embedded in that issue. Number one, there's the civil liberties question, which are very important ones. And a couple members of our Vermont Senate raised a steep, fierce objection to the idea that the government could monitor people's use of websites and restrict access to pornographic sites and others. And when you frame the issue that way, naturally, there's going to be, that would make all of us a little skeptical. But what's important to remember is that in this case, the government is the employer. Now, granted, we think government employs too many people, and we'd like to see them be a very small employer, but they are the employer. And in the workplace, it is the norm that employers have the right to monitor and govern people's use of the company resources during company time. So I think there's a foundation for the restrictions and the monitoring on that basis. The second question maybe is a little funnier, maybe, in some ways, but not in others. As you say, we have ambivalent feelings about this. But if it's a guy or a lady who's working on dreaming up new regulations and new taxes, I just assumed they were on on another website rather than doing their normal work. The economy will be a lot better for it.
I'll agree with you on that point. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for watching this True North Extra. Have a great weekend.